Have you ever noticed how sometimes the most unassuming things, like an old book, can suddenly become like portals to the past?
Oh, absolutely. Like you stumble upon some dusty old journal and boom, a window opens into a whole other world. It's fascinating.
That's exactly what happened to us when you sent us this incredible document.
Oh, right. The one about the Pamir languages.
Yes, this is going to be a fantastic deep dive. For our listeners who might not be familiar with the source material we're using, we're going to be talking about excerpts from this YouTube video transcript. It's from a channel called Languages&MuseumsILove. And it's all about this really interesting old journal called the Zeitschrift der Vergleichenden Sprachforschung.
The Journal of Comparative Philology in the field of Indo-European languages and English.
Thank you. I always struggle with those longer German titles. But anyway, the real star of today's show, so to speak, is a German scholar named Wolfgang Klenz.
Ah, yes, Cleanse.
So back in 1933, he published this huge article, like 228 pages long, in a special issue of this very journal. And you know what it was about? The Pamir dialects, specifically those spoken by the Shugni people.
The Shugnis are a fascinating group, really. They're a smaller linguistic community within the Pamir Mountain region, and they have these unique dialects that are part of a larger family of languages. And as always, we want to make sure this deep dive is both thorough and accessible, get to the heart of the matter for our listeners who are eager to learn.
Right. No one wants to wade through 200-plus pages of dense academic writing, so we're doing the heavy lifting for you all. Okay, so let's start with the journal itself. Zeitschrift der Vergleichenden Sprachforschung. That's quite a name. It must have been pretty important in the world of linguistics, right?
It was a big deal, definitely. Founded way back in 1921. They actually later shortened the name to Zeitschrift für Vergleich der Sprachforschung. I guess even academics like to keep things concise sometimes. Anyway, the journal published over 400 scientific articles, all about natural languages.
Wow. 400 articles, and it ran until 2005.
That's right. So it wasn't just some short-lived publication. It was a really significant resource for linguistic research for almost a century.
And Klenz's article, this amazing piece of work we're exploring, it wasn't just some theoretical study, was it? He actually got out there in the field.
You're absolutely right. In his introduction, he mentions that this article is actually just the first part of the results from this incredible expedition he was part of back in 1928. It was a joint German-Soviet expedition to the Allied Pamir region. Can you imagine?
Oh, wow. Talk about getting firsthand experience with the languages and cultures you're studying. That's dedication.
And what's interesting is that Klenz actually mentions that his focus, specifically on the languages, was a bit different from what other members of the expedition were researching. It just goes to show that even within a large-scale collaborative project, you often have individuals pursuing their own specialized interests.
Yeah, and it really makes you appreciate the diversity of research that must have been going on during that expedition. It wasn't just one monolithic project. It was a whole collection of different inquiries.
Absolutely. And one little detail that really struck me from Klenz's introduction was how grateful he was to the journal editors for publishing his work. He even mentions the difficult economic times in Germany in 1933.
Right. Makes you realize that this research was happening against a backdrop of real-world challenges. It wasn't just happening in some ivory tower, isolated from everything else going on.
Exactly. It really humanizes the whole thing. And it also highlights the importance of academic publishing, especially during tough times. It's about preserving knowledge and sharing it with the world, no matter what's happening around you.
So this Pamir expedition of 1928, it sounds like it was a huge undertaking. Was it just Klenz by himself, or was it a bigger operation?
Oh, no, it was a massive collaborative effort. It was actually organized by two main groups, the Turkestan Committee of Sciences and the German Emergency Association for Science, which is also known as the Notgemeinschaft der Wissenschaften.
Okay, so some serious scientific organizations involved. And that second one, the Notgemeinschaft, didn't they play a role in supporting German science after World War I?
They did. It was founded in 1920 to help keep scientific research going in Germany, despite all the challenges after the war. So this expedition was a sign that even in tough times, the pursuit of knowledge continued.
That's fascinating. And what about the expedition itself? How big was it exactly?
Well, hold on to your hat, because the numbers are mind-boggling. There were scientists from both Germany and the Soviet Union, equal numbers from each country, plus all the support staff they needed.
Okay, that's already quite a few people, I imagine.
We're talking about 165 people in total, 160 horses, and get this, 60 camels.
60 camels? That's a whole caravan. You can't just pop down to the rental place for that many camels.
Exactly. It was a huge logistical operation, and they were out there for 8 months. Think about the planning that must have gone into that, the supplies, the coordination. It's incredible.
And all of this in the 1920s, no less. This is a whole different world in terms of communication and transportation.
Absolutely. And it really emphasizes the dedication of these researchers. They weren't just sitting in their offices, they were out there braving the elements to pursue their scientific goals.
And it wasn't just about language, right? Klenz was interested in all sorts of things related to life in the Pamir region.
Oh, absolutely. He was very thorough. He documented the agriculture of the region, the types of crops they cultivated, how they raised their animals, the different animal breeds they had.
So he was really trying to get a complete picture of the culture and the environment, not just the language in isolation.
Exactly. And he also studied the different populations in the area, how they were distributed across the territory, including smaller ethnic groups and where they lived, even those living in high-altitude settlements. He was interested in the whole tapestry of human life in that region.
It sounds like he was a meticulous researcher. I remember the video mentioned some detailed tables in his article. What kind of information did he include in those?
Well, he was very thorough in documenting the different populations. He would often list the names these groups used for themselves, not just what others called them, and he would note the year the data was collected. It just shows how careful he was in trying to create an accurate record.
It's like he was trying to capture a snapshot of that moment in time, freezing it for future generations to study. It's a remarkable effort.
It truly is. And his approach to studying the languages themselves was equally impressive. It wasn't just about creating lists of words. He wanted to understand the deeper structures, the poetry, the stories, the soul of these languages.
So what did that actually look like in his research? What kind of things did he document?
Well, he wrote down actual texts like songs and tales using a system called international transcription.
International transcription.
Yeah, it's a standardized way of writing down sounds so that linguists from all over the world can understand them.
Ah, that makes sense. It's like a universal language for describing the sounds of language.
Exactly. And alongside these transcribed texts, he also provided German translations. This was incredibly valuable because it allowed people who didn't speak the Pamir languages to access these cultural treasures.
It's like he was creating a bridge between cultures, allowing them to understand each other through language.
And you know, what's even more remarkable is that many of these Pamir languages didn't have established writing systems at the time.
Really? So these recordings of songs and tales are like these irreplaceable records of their oral traditions.
Precisely. And Klenz recognized this. He understood the importance of capturing these languages in their spoken form, especially since their histories and traditions were primarily passed down orally.
That's fascinating. It highlights the diversity of ways in which human cultures preserve and transmit knowledge. For some, it's through writing. For others, it's through the spoken word.
Exactly. And in the Pamir region, Persian often served as the lingua franca for written communication. It was like a common language that people from different language backgrounds could use to communicate with each other in writing.
So you'd have these communities speaking their own distinct languages, but then using Persian when they needed to write something down.
Precisely. And Klenz documented this as well, even including examples of how Persian influenced the local languages. It shows the complex interactions between languages in a multilingual environment.
It really underscores how language is constantly evolving, adapting to the needs of the people who use it.
And Klenz didn't just stop at documenting texts and analyzing the influence of Persian. He went deep into the linguistic analysis, creating dictionaries and outlining the grammar of these languages.
Oh, wow. So he was really trying to create a comprehensive linguistic resource for these languages. That's a huge amount of work.
It is. He created both Shuni German and German Shuni dictionaries, and what's even more impressive is that he differentiated them based on the different dialects of Shuni, because there were 3, maybe even 4 distinct dialects that he identified.
So he was really paying attention to the finer points of linguistic variation within the Shuni language itself.
Absolutely. And he didn't just stop at dictionaries. He also detailed the grammar of the language, covering things like pronouns, verbs, demonstratives, words like this and that, all the building blocks of language. It was a truly comprehensive linguistic study.
It sounds like Klenz was really a pioneer in the study of Pamir languages. His work laid the groundwork for future scholars to build upon. Now, the transcript also mentions something about the political and social context surrounding this research. It sounds like Klenz's work wasn't just happening in a vacuum. It was intertwined with the larger historical events of the time.
That's right. And one thing that's interesting is that Klenz himself seems to maintain a neutral stance in his writing. He doesn't really reveal his own political views. He just presents his findings in a very scholarly and objective way.
So he's letting the research speak for itself, not injecting his personal opinions into the analysis.
Exactly. But he does provide some valuable context about the region, both before and after the Russian Revolution of 1917. He explains that before the revolution, that part of Central Asia was part of the Russian Empire, divided into the Governor-Generalship of Turkestan and the protectorates of Bukhara and Khiva. So it gives you a sense of the political landscape at the time.
And then, of course, the revolution changed everything.
It did. And Klenz mentions how, in the aftermath, there was a lot of political experimentation. They were trying out different ways of organizing the region.
It makes sense. After a revolution, there's often a period of instability as people try to figure out how to rebuild society.
And eventually, this led to the creation of republics based on ethnicity, like Uzbekistan for the Uzbeks and Tajikistan for the Tajiks.
So the political boundaries were redrawn to reflect the different ethnic groups in the region.
Precisely. And what's interesting is that Klenz seems to suggest that these changes were made, at least in part, to benefit the local populations, not just to serve the interests of the Soviet government.
That's a nuanced perspective.
Yeah.
It suggests that there was some genuine effort to give these different ethnic groups a greater degree of self-determination.
It does. And speaking of interesting perspectives, there's this fascinating anecdote in the transcript about Klenz meeting the president of Tajikistan.
Oh, right. That's a great story. Tell us more about that.
Well, apparently the president was a native Tajik himself, and he was very interested in promoting the local languages of Central Asia and the Pamirs, elevating them to the level of state languages. At that time, Persian was the main state language.
So there was a real push to recognize and support the linguistic diversity of the region.
Absolutely. And the president even gave Klenz some gifts, things like primers in Tajik languages and even a children's Bible. It shows that they were actively working to develop educational resources in these languages.
Wow, that's amazing. It really underscores the importance they placed on language and literacy. And it's a testament to the power of collaboration, how researchers and policymakers can work together to support language development.
It is. And it seems that this collaboration continued even after Klenz's initial publication. He later received new children's primers for the Shuni language from the Soviet Union.
So the work was ongoing, even across national borders.
Exactly. And these primers were created by a Russian scientist and illustrated by a Russian artist, although the artist's name isn't mentioned in the transcript. But it just shows that there was this continued interest in supporting the development of the Shuni language.
It really emphasizes the international nature of scholarship. Knowledge knows no boundaries, as they say.
And the video commentator makes this really insightful point about how even in 1933, with all the political tension brewing in Europe, there were still strong scientific relations between Germany and the Soviet Union.
Oh, right. It's easy to forget that in the midst of all the political turmoil, there were still these pockets of cooperation and exchange happening.
It's really remarkable, and Klenz's article itself is a testament to that. He even mentions reading and referencing Russian publications in his work. It just shows how interconnected the academic world can be, even when the political world seems to be pulling in the opposite direction.
It's a reminder that science and scholarship can transcend political boundaries, that the pursuit of knowledge can be a unifying force.
Absolutely. And, for our listeners who might be interested in digging deeper into Klenz's work, the good news is that it's still accessible.
Oh, that's great. Where can people find it?
The video mentions that you can find copies of the journal in any German library. So if you happen to be in Germany or have access to a German library, you can go on your own little linguistic adventure.
So wrapping things up, it's clear that Klenz's article is much more than just a dry academic text. It's a window into a fascinating time and place, a testament to the dedication of scholars like Klenz, and a reminder of the enduring power of language and culture.
It is. It gives us a glimpse into the world of linguistic fieldwork in the early 20th century, the challenges and rewards of international collaboration, and the richness of the Shuni language and culture. It's a truly valuable piece of research.
And I think it speaks to our listeners' desire for in-depth knowledge, for those fascinating details that really bring history to life.
It does, and it leaves us with a final thought-provoking question. Considering the sheer effort involved in this kind of research, the long expeditions, the meticulous data collection, the handwritten notes and translations, all in a pre-digital age, what does it tell us about the human desire to understand language and culture? How does that compare to our modern approaches, where we have so much information at our fingertips? It's a question worth pondering.
It is, and it makes you appreciate the dedication of scholars like Klins, who laid the groundwork for our understanding of these languages and cultures.
Absolutely.
Well, that was an amazing journey through time, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely fascinating.
And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to continue exploring the rich tapestry of human language and history. Until next time, keep those minds engaged.